Talented video essayist Cam James made a video addressing the housing crisis and, in particular, the plight of homeless people. I kind of like Cam James. He's made some good videos in the past exposing scams, and like I said, he's obviously talented. But for several reasons, this video missed the mark. What I mostly took issue with was his diagnosis of the homelessness problem in America and his potential solutions to that problem. So today I'll be reacting to this video, explaining where he went wrong and what would be a more accurate diagnosis and solution to the issues he addressed. The video starts at 4:08 after an intro and a sponsor. Thank you later. Unfortunately for us, it starts at one of the issues that I take with this video, which is how much Cam cares about what words we use to address homeless people.
I gotta be the language police again and break down why I've been using the word unhoused. This ain't just semantics. It's important.
Before explaining why he uses unhoused instead of homeless, Cam goes into a presentation explaining the history of the usage of terms such as black, Negro, and colored, but to take the interchangeability of words used to refer to black people and compare it to words used to describe homeless people. Except it's not clear what his point was in this part of the video, other than you can use different words to refer to the same group. But in the end, he trivializes his own explanation by saying, it doesn't really matter, just say it with respect.
Some of us like one, and some of us prefer the other.
Well, then what was the point of you explaining all that? Going into this, I thought he was going to say that the words we use matter, and there's a reason to make a distinction. But in the end, he kind of just said, no, these words all kind of mean the same thing, just say them nicely.
Even more of us probably don't really care. It's not that deep. Just say it with respect. Hopefully, y'all saw where I was going with that long-ass analogy.
No, we have no idea what you're trying to say.
The word homeless has become pretty negative in connotation over time.
This is somewhat true.
The use of the homeless to refer to people is especially trash. Kind of like when people call us the blacks.
Wait, I thought you said the words we use don't really matter, so should we use the African Americans or the colored instead? Also, this is only an America problem. No other group in the world takes issue with being referred to as the Jews or the Asians or the natives, etc.
Homelessness is not only a complex state of existence with different groups within it.
It's not that complex, bro. If you don't have a house, you're homeless by definition.
It's also often temporary. Using a temporary state of being to label a very large, very diverse collection of people ain't cool.
No, it's an accurate way to describe a group of people who happen to have something in common. Just because it's temporary doesn't make it any less accurate. This would be like me taking issue with someone being labeled unemployed because it's temporary. How else am I supposed to refer to the population of people who don't have a job? For a more insane example, imagine taking issue or getting offended at me referring to a certain subsect of the population as pregnant women. Because as Cam says,
using a temporary state of being to label a very large, very diverse collection of people ain't cool.
According to Cam, referring to a woman as pregnant ain't cool.
It'd be like me calling all white people slave owners. Y'all don't do that anymore.
No, it'd be more like calling fair-skinned people white, because that's an accurate description of what they are.
The term is increasingly used in a way where it implies someone is dangerous or devious.
I'm not sure that Cam knows how a connotation for a word is formed, but if he didn't know, here's how. A connotation is a feeling or idea that a word invokes when used. This kind of secondary definition is formed from experiences you have in reference to the original word in question. When you see a homeless person, you associate descriptors and things you observe about them to the word homeless, because for whatever reason you know that this particular person is homeless. It may happen to be the case that the person you saw was erratic or mentally ill or drug addicted and may be dangerous. Now, after a while of seeing this pattern, you might come to realize that a lot of these people you encounter as homeless tend to share some of these same characteristics. And this would happen to be the population of homeless people who tend to panhandle on busy intersections or on public transport. So naturally, when you start hearing the word homeless, you might start to build this image in your head of a drug-addicted panhandler. The fact that this is a connotation for the word homeless that you have isn't your fault. It's just pattern recognition. It's just you observing what these people look like. This is just an accurate representation of the people you've come across that fit into this category. It's the same reason stereotypes exist. They don't come from nowhere. If you associate Asian Americans with being studious and good at math, that's because they are. Asians, for example, far outperform any other demographic when it comes to SAT scores.
The alternative term I've been using in this piece is unhoused.
Cam seems to think that using the word unhoused will magically erase any connotation related to the word homeless. As I've already explained, connotation is something related to experience. It's not something you can teach, as with the denotation of a word. There's no right or wrong connotation for a word. Replacing one word with another word that has the exact same denotation isn't going to magically erase the connotation connotation for the old word. Going back to our Asian student example, this would be like if teachers outlawed the word Asian being used in a classroom because they didn't like the association with them being good at math. Well, eventually we're going to refer to them as something else that would have the exact same connotation. We'd call them Orientals or slanted eye people or something. And even with this new word, we would still have the exact same connotation because the subject in question didn't change, just our word used to refer to them. Basically, what I'm saying is this whole conversation is meaningless.
I'm not going to belabor this point. What people choose to be called on a case-by-case basis overrides this entire discussion.
I hope Cam will respect my chosen title of Supreme Lord Dictator.
I'm an ally.
This explains almost everything he said so far. I want to wrap this whole nonsense discussion up by saying that I do think unhoused and homeless refer to two different types of people. While when I think of homeless, I think of panhandling drug addict. When I hear unhoused, I usually think of someone who just got evicted because they weren't able to pay rent this month. While I'm not advocating for the usage of the word unhoused, I do think that it has a different connotation and maybe even denotation to the word homeless, and to use the two terms interchangeably would be a disservice to the English language.
This ain't just semantics. It's important.
So 9 minutes into the video, Cam finally gets to some hard facts. He rattles off some stats about the homeless population, but the only one that really matters is that 653,000 people experienced homelessness last year.
Let's talk about why many of them ended up on the street in the first place. Evictions are on the rise.
Cam finally starts to get to the root of the problem, although we'll see that he slightly misses the mark. Here he expresses how he believes that rising rents cause evictions, which can cause homelessness.
Everywhere where evictions spiked the most, rents were climbing at a commensurate rate. Correlation ain't causation, but correlation's this strong, might as well be.
I think it's safe to say that there's a cause between rising rents and rising evictions because one directly causes the other. A rising rent may make it harder for you to make your payment on time, and difficulty in making the payment can lead to an eviction. Cam notes that landlords are incentivized to evict tenants so they can get higher paying ones, and he's not wrong. Landlords are rational actors who rent out their units to turn out a maximum profit, just as every individual and business is under rational choice theory. What Cam misses is the root of the incentive itself. Why are rents rising so rapidly?
As you can see, rates have been pretty high for the past year, but that's not giving you the full picture. If we check out what it was like before and after the pandemic, yeah. Eviction rates dropped down to 9% in April of 2020 due to government-mandated freezes, then skyrocketed as soon as those limitations were lifted.
If the government forcibly prevents a business from collecting revenue during a certain period of time, then once that period ends, the business is forced to overcollect to make up for any lost revenues. A rational actor is forced to evict their tenant if their tenant is unable to pay the rent due to their own missed revenue. I'm sure that there's at least a few landlords who don't care about having to evict someone, but I promise you that the vast majority of them would rather not have to. But when the economy forces them to make a decision, it's either them or the tenant.
Cam, how did unhoused people end up in this position? They need to make better decisions. Yeah, it's not that simple and never has been. Let's debunk that.
Cam seems to take issue with personal responsibility, and in the next few clips, we'll explain why homeless people should be free from responsibility to at least some extent. While some part of your life can result in negative outcomes due to outside factors, a big part of your life is due to your own decisions. You are in control of your life, as opposed to what Cam is trying to tell you here. Before he even starts getting into this point, I just have to say yes, making any amount of money is better than making no money. It's really nice to know that Cam isn't strawmanning any of his critics here by saying that they just need to get jobs, as if getting a job will fix everything in the life of a homeless person, which nobody believes. But a job would at least help their situation.
Cassie Norris is a mother in a two-parent household, and she points out that it's tough to interview when you don't have the resources to cover childcare.
Cam goes on to describe the case of Cassie Norris, who is having trouble finding a job because she has to take care of her children. Now, this is wild to me. I thought when you had children, they just took care of themselves. What Cam doesn't mention is that Cassie isn't homeless, and the article doesn't mention her being at risk for homelessness either. He also conveniently forgot to mention that she has 4 kids and a husband who works a full-time job.
They were on SNAP and Medicaid before the pandemic, and they still are.
Sounds like the social safety net is working. Obviously, her situation is very different from the average panhandler. Not to say that she isn't struggling, but I was under the presumption that this video was about homeless people. Yes, an individual asking for money on the streets needs a job if they want to ever escape homelessness. That's not negotiable.
Our politicians are unable to pass immigration reform.
I agree, but I highly doubt me and Cam are going to agree on what immigration reform means.
That reform would not only smooth the process so people don't have to cross the border in record numbers, it would also provide more resources to these cities that are seeing adverse effects of trying to support more people.
I don't want to strawman Cam here, but it really sounds like what he's saying is we should have a more inclusive immigration policy so that all the people that cross the border illegally can get here on a plane with a visa instead. He also mentioned spending more money. We all know spending money fixes everything, especially when the government does it. Okay, so we should let more people in and we should spend more money. Got it? What does this have to do with homelessness?
Most immigrants that come here work hard and contribute directly to the economy. So it's lazy and inaccurate to put the blame at their feet.
Sure, I agree most immigrants work hard. I'm gonna clean up what Cam was trying to say because he didn't really make a counter argument. He just kind of said, well, I like immigrants, which is not really an argument. What people are trying to say when they say that immigrants cause homelessness is that immigrants take up jobs that would otherwise be done by an American, which is 100% an undeniable true fact. You cannot debate this. If immigrants disappear tomorrow, Americans would have the opportunity to fill those vacant roles at a higher rate. What Cam's argument here should have been is that the assumption that immigrants take up a finite amount of work that would otherwise be done by Americans is something known as the lump of labor fallacy. This idea is fallacious because not every person who works has a job. As the economy grows, some people end up running businesses where they end up employing themselves and others. So to be clear, I had to make this whole argument for Cam, but this is what it should be. If we pretend that I'm Cam here real quick, I would say immigrants don't affect homelessness because they don't reduce the number of jobs available. And that's because some immigrants will work jobs and some will create jobs. And to that I would say I agree, Cam, except this is only valid with legal immigration. Why? Because legal immigrants usually know something about the country, they speak our language, they usually have a specific set of skills, which is why they were let in the first place, and they're usually educated. In contrast, the vast majority of illegal immigrants work low-skill, menial jobs. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with that, except, like I said earlier, they are replacing an American who would otherwise work those jobs for a higher wage. The reason the lump of labor fallacy doesn't apply in this case is because illegal immigrants are a lot less likely to create jobs and a lot more likely to fill a low-skill, low-paying job, therefore decreasing the amount of available jobs. In this way, illegal immigration does, in a kind of circuitous way, contribute to homelessness because the increased labor leads to a lower pay for those jobs, which presumably is one of the jobs a homeless person would work if they were getting back on their feet. Sorry that took so long, but like I said, I had to explain Cam's position for him there. That's probably a good idea.
Many people trapped in the cycle of chronic homelessness are suffering from substance abuse issues and mental health problems. Our healthcare system is beyond broken for those experiencing poverty. A universal healthcare system would address many of the problems faced by the unhoused population. European nations with more supportive social safety systems don't have this problem.
Look, unlike Cam, I realize that the healthcare system of a whole nation is a very complex issue, so I'm not going to be covering it in detail. But nations with universal healthcare do have this problem. The UK has a single-payer universal healthcare system, and they have a higher rate of homelessness than the United States does. Now, obviously, that's a simplified view of it. There are other factors involved, and there are also countries that have universal healthcare that have a lower rate of homelessness. But my point is that Cam makes it sound like this one thing could solve homelessness when that's not the case.
Substance abuses can be the cause, but it's more often the effect of having to live in a dangerous environment.
I agree with Cam to some extent here. It's not inconceivable that if you're living on the street, simultaneously struggling with past trauma or mental illness, that you would take to self-medicating to alleviate your pain a little bit. And yet, if I asked Cam if this was a good reason to justify drug abuse, I doubt that he would say yes. The claim he was supposedly debunking was they need to stop doing drugs. And yet, I know that if I pressed Cam enough on this, he would agree with me and say, yes, overcoming drug addiction is a key part of overcoming homelessness. So it would seem to me that Cam agrees with the idea he's trying to debunk.
The primary laws broken by unhoused people are the ones governments created to push them into the justice system.
I personally think some of these laws for sleeping outside are problematic when they result in fines toward a homeless person. Obviously, I don't think anybody would say that this is a justifiable application of the law. The main purpose of these laws that directly affect homeless people is to push them into shelters and to places where they can get the help they need. Of course, as Cam mentions, these laws aren't perfect and they may result in some unintended consequences, but it isn't necessarily a case for getting rid of them. How else would you incentivize homeless people to get to a shelter? How else would you prevent streets full of encampments littered with drug paraphernalia?
New York City's Mayor Eric Adams and California's Governor Gavin Newsom,
Two states with a dire homeless crisis where you get pushed on the tracks or get diarrhea dumped on you.
authorized people exhibiting psychiatric problems or whose families go to a judge to be involuntarily hospitalized. Hopefully, I don't have to explain that putting people in hospitals against their will is irresponsible at best.
Really? Would it be irresponsible to put a unconscious person who's bleeding out in the hospital against their own will? Obviously, Cam would say, no, that's not irresponsible. And what I would say then is, what's the difference? Both the person on the street exhibiting psychiatric problems and the person bleeding out unconscious are in need of immediate care. Why is it wrong to forcibly provide care to one, but not the other? Unless Cam somehow thinks that mental health is less important than physical health, which I'm sure he would disagree with.
I'm done talking about how bad things are. The rest of this video is dedicated to what you and I can do about this. Acknowledge unhoused people's existence. Look them in the eyes. Acknowledge their humanity.
The main reason why homeless people are ignored on the street is because 1, people think they're going to spend the money on drugs, and 2, they behave erratically and people are scared of them. If approached by a homeless person where the homeless person exhibited no signs of aggravation or erratic behavior and they simply asked for some food, any person would be more than happy to help them. The problem is there's no way of knowing if this homeless person is dangerous or not, and there's no way to guarantee that any money you give them won't perpetuate their substance abuse problem. So unfortunately for most people, the safest bet is to ignore them.
Something I've never heard anyone address on here is that capitalism is designed to do this. I got money to make. I have no time to care about you.
No, this has nothing to do with capitalism. Like I mentioned before, people mostly ignore homeless because they're either scared of them or they don't want to perpetuate their substance abuse. In contrast to what Cam is saying, people actually do stop to help someone that's having a medical health emergency. So what he's saying makes no sense. It's not like people have zero time for anything else other than making money in a capitalist system. In fact, it's quite the opposite. People in capitalist countries often have more free time due to the fact that businesses are more efficient and workers have a higher output, meaning that they can work less hours to achieve the same results.
As I've said to some of the commenters on my employment episode, y'all are not alone. Please don't allow shame to make you wait too long to seek help. We all need it sometimes. My parents needed help at times. I needed help at times. We all do.
I like Cam's closing message here if you're struggling, don't feel ashamed to ask for help. And if you're not struggling, don't shame people who need help. Yes, we should do everything we can to help homeless people get the shelter they need, help with their substance abuse problems, and rehabilitation into the real world. My point in responding to Cam's video isn't to discourage anyone trying to fix the homeless problem. It's more so to point out a lot of the nonsense ideas that people have about why homelessness exists and their inefficient approaches to solving it. If you believe that homelessness exists due to a lack of affordable housing and good paying jobs, the only way to fix it is to incentivize the creation of those jobs and those houses. That means allowing businesses the means and resources to employ people and reducing the regulations around home construction and rentals. You can't possibly solve homelessness by giving everyone a free house. You have to prevent government regulations from making whole buildings so expensive and rental prices so high. Please don't give money directly to homeless people. Imagine that the person you give $1 to was intending on spending it on crack. If you were able to, would you just give this person crack? Of course not. The best way to help a homeless person is to provide them food and shelter until they're eventually able to sustain themselves, not by enabling their life on the street. Instead, I would ask you to consider donating to some of the charities listed by Cam in his original video. I'll link them as well as some additional ones in the video description. Thanks for watching.